right, thank you everyone for joining. We're gonna give 1 more minute before officially starting for anybody who's just getting off work. While we're waiting for that 1 minute, what chapters do we have on today? If anyone's speaking, they are on mute.
Twin Cities chapter.
Hey, Ashley. Yeah, it's on as well. I think that was Leonard that spoke up, but Twin Cities is here.
Hey, Anna, hey, Leonard. Any other chapters other than Twin Cities on?
What do you get if you take the Twin Cities and multiply them by 2? What number would you get?
Quad Cities is here.
Yeah.
Hey, Sudan.
Hey, hey.
Awesome. We have Twin Cities, Quad Cities. Any other non-numerical cities on the call?
Dayton, Ohio.
Awesome. How's it going, Dayton?
Got here.
I'm here for it. Awesome. All right. Well, anyone else who hops on, I will just comment in the chat box for them to say hello. So thank you guys for joining. Happy Monday. Hope your week started off on a good foot. I know here in the Twin Cities, the weather was beautiful. So we truly appreciate you prioritizing this meeting and not being out by the lake or whatever happens in the Quad Cities. So the rundown, this is our chapter leadership training. It is broken up into 4 days at about an hour and a half each. So today we're kicking it off with NSBE professionals one-on-one. Whoop, whoop. We're going to continue this training tomorrow with communication and finance zones. Then Wednesday will be membership and admin zone. And then we'll wrap up the week of training on Thursday with a full evening of program zone. So this call will start at 6:30 Central Standard Time each day, and they're in before around 8 p.m. All trainings will be recorded, so please share that with your board members in case people cannot make it. We will make sure that the information is disseminated. And before we pop into the wonderful national content that will be presented by our National Professionals Membership Chair, I wanted to introduce you to your 2019-2020 Region 4 Professional Executive Board. We have a lot of returning faces for anyone who is a returning NSBE professional member. We have over 5 chapters represented, from Twin Cities to Milwaukee to Indianapolis, Dayton, and Chicago. Well, we will go a little deeper into introductions of who is who on the admin zone call, but want to make sure you guys put a face to a name. And if you did not know who your counterpart is, please feel free to screenshot this and reach on out. Awesome. Without further ado, I would love to introduce you to our National Professionals Membership Chair. He's a whiz kid when it comes to the data and really speaking for our members. So I'll pass it off to you, Eric.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Particularly fond of the mother region, Region 4, and that's because that is my home. I am originally from the Gem City, Dayton, Ohio. Actually went to school at the University of Dayton, so I am proud and honored to have been asked to present to you all this evening. Basically, I've done some of these presentations with some of the other chapter leaders over this year. And, you know, one of the things I want to reiterate or pass along from my role as the National Professionals Membership Chairperson for, as a part of the PEB, to our chapter leaders is just how important your roles are in our chapter development efforts. And so I want to give some content for you in terms of some of those things and some things to think about. The agenda that I have for you today, it will let me advance. There we go. I want to give you guys a rundown of what from my perspective, it means to be a chapter leader. And so we'll cover that. I'll really quickly run you through the 2019-2020 national directives from our national chairperson. as well as the professional's vision from our National Professionals Chairperson. Give a little bit of information about my view on how to build a strong, healthy, and sustainable NSBE Professionals chapter, and then wrap it up with some tools and resources, particularly focused around the Chapter Health Initiative for Professionals program, which is your resource to help you from a national level both gain some best practices, but then also be able to share the things that you guys are executing with your regional professionals executive board, as well as the professionals executive board. We can then leverage that information, try to improve our best practices, but then also to provide you with feedback on suggestions and ideas that come from other areas and the like. So, and then there's obviously the rewards and recognition that we offer as a part of that as well. So without further ado, let me get into it by saying, first of all, and to me most importantly of all, thank you very much for taking on the role of being a chapter leader. As someone who was previously a chapter leader in my current city of Philadelphia and did that for 3 years, I understand how much of a challenge it is to operate at this level. People told me before I got into that role that being a chapter president is literally the hardest thing to do in NSBE. And I believe I found that out on my own. And so for those of you who are chapter officers, whether you're the chapter president of your chapter or you serve as another officer on your chapter level, understand that I value and respect what you guys do in terms of making NSBE what it is. You guys are the boots on the ground. You're the people that interact with our individual members on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a monthly basis. And you're the people that make NSBE's mission happen in your location. And so without your commitment, NSBE wouldn't be able to do what it does. And I want to relay on behalf of the Professionals Executive Board and for myself personally, a heartfelt thank you for stepping up and taking up the leadership role. Now, with that said, with that comes some responsibilities, and so that's what I want to dive into next. I'd like to introduce to you the concept of a fiduciary, and it's probably a word you've heard in certain contexts. I know a lot of time people think about fiduciary in the context of financial or monetary assets. The reality is the word that I use as a synonym for fiduciary is a caretaker. None of us owns NSBE. As NSBE is a nonprofit, NSBE is actually owned by the general public. And what the general public entrusts NSBE to do is to meet its mission, which we all know what the mission is, right? If we're not doing that, then we are not operating in the public trust. And it's just like any other public entity. Anybody who is given the responsibility to take care and is trusted with the assets that are associated with that have an obligation and responsibility to meet what the purpose is, the stated purposes of the organization. So when you think about who NSBE's fiduciaries are, right? I think we often think the main national executive board of NSBE, they basically serve as the fiduciaries. They make all of the overarching decisions for NSBE. And they certainly are fiduciaries. But you can make the argument that every board is a fiduciary because we are all entrusted with certain assets of the organization. And that's especially true at the chapter level. The reality is that when you think about a NSBE chapter, Twin Cities Professionals chapter of the National Society of Black Engineers, inside of NSBE, we know you as Twin Cities. But in Minneapolis, St. Paul, you're NSBE, right? And so that outward facing recognition that you represent NSBE in your community is important to keep in mind as you're being responsible for that asset there. And NSBE as a national organization has an obligation to support you in order to execute our mission in that location, right? And so in order to support you, we offer, when we talk about assets, that includes information, who are the members that are in your location? And when they sign up for national membership, you have access to that information. You have an obligation as a fiduciary to take care of that information and take care of the organization as a whole. So what are the duties of being, what are the fiduciary duties? These are duties that apply at the national level, the regional level, and even at your chapter level. And there are three common ones that are defined, and we'll go through each of them individually. The first one is the duty of obedience. The second is the duty of loyalty. And the third is the duty of due care. We talk about the duty of obedience. There are essentially two key tasks that fall under that duty. The first one is that you obey the law. There's an obligation that all of us has to make sure that we are following all the laws that apply to us. On a national level, we have an obligation to make sure that we are in compliance with federal tax law, right? And so we make sure that we do that. But if you're looking at it from a chapter perspective, each of you is typically registered as its own nonprofit, and you fall under the rules of the state's nonprofit laws that's set forth by the government of the state as administered by the Secretary of State's office for your given state. And likewise, those laws include what you're allowed to do with respect to soliciting funds and doing fundraising, as well as any registration requirements you have, articles of incorporation and the like. Other relevant state laws, and I mentioned the federal tax law as well. Even chapters at a state level or local level have some IRS obligations. So if you're looking to get a federal tax exemption, you have to make sure that you're complying with those laws to ensure that you qualify. So one is making sure you're following all the laws. The other is that you make sure that as it relates to your chapter's work, NSBE is adhering to its mission, right? And so when we talk about obedience, it's obedience to NSBE's mission. If your chapter is not doing things in service of NSBE's mission, then you are violating this particular fiduciary duty. I think we all fully understand that, but recognizing that if I stand as a chapter leader, if I'm working in a manner that doesn't really serve NSBE's perfect, but it sounds like it's a good thing to do, we still run the risk of running afoul of this. And so what that means for you as a officer or a leader in your chapter is you always have to have the mission first in your mind whenever you're making any decision, whenever you're executing any programming. The second fiduciary duty is the duty of loyalty. And that's very similar to the duty of obedience, where you're adhering to the mission. But specifically what this essentially is saying is you need to put the interests of the organization when you act as a chapter officer ahead of any other obligation. Now, what does that practically mean for you as a chapter leader? A lot of times interests can conflict with each other. You may have your own personal interests, and then there's the organization's interests. And when those interests are in conflict with each other, your duty and your obligation as a chapter leader is to put your personal interest to the side and think exclusively into what the interest is of the organization. Now, there are other ways that you can have conflict, right? And that can happen within the given organization, right? You have perhaps the interest of the national organization and then the interest of what the organization's interest is locally. The classic example that always is one that we struggle with, and it's always worthy of discussion. I bring it up here because I feel like it's worthy of discussion, not that we're going to have that discussion here, but it's something I want you to think about, is the whole conversation of national dues versus local dues. And what does it mean to be a member in the context of national dues versus local dues? We have some chapters that say, hey, if you pay your local dues, you're a member of the organization. Our organization's governing documents clearly state that you become a member through the payment of national dues to the National Society. So it becomes clear from an organizational definition standpoint that the interest of the organization that members pay their national dues. We obviously advocate for chapters that look to seek to have their local chapters pay their local dues, do that. But when we serve in a caretaker role as a fiduciary of the organization, and part of its assets being that you're responsible for managing a chapter, when you talk about the duty of loyalty to the organization, what that means is you have the duty, the obligation to put the interests of the society as a whole first and say that, yes, you do have to, in order to be a member, you do have to pay national dues. And that's not to say that you can't seek support and have people who are willing to merely support the chapter and that's all they're interested in, do that. But that's not what membership is. It's merely support when you're supporting the local chapter. You need, if you want to be a member, membership is paying the national member dues, right? So I like to put this in this context because a lot of times there's a lot of argument about should I. I think the key thing to keep in mind and remember is that your duty as a chapter leader is to be loyal to the organization, not to do something that's in conflict with the law, because that's not loyal to the organization. If someone's telling you to break the law in service of the organization, it's them that's not being loyal. You being loyal by doing the right thing in the interest of the organization is being loyal. But when we talk about that specific issue, for me, it is a duty of loyalty to say, yes, if you want to be a member, this is what our governing documents say. We need to advocate and support that. Third rule, or the third duty of a fiduciary is the duty of due care. And really what this asks you to do is to use your common sense to do what would appear to be right. Okay, so you execute your responsibilities with great care and with great dutifulness. And you use your personal skill and use due diligence in making decisions on behalf of the organization. So what you see here is these three duties all work together to orient decision-making processes in a way that it is in service of the organization. Now, I know a lot of times people think by virtue of, hindsight, maybe that wasn't the best thing for an organization. And I think it's important to note that from the standard of the duty of due care, the outcome is not what you are to be judged by when it comes to did you exercise due care. There are two ways to assess the duty of due care in terms of looking at an individual's or an officer's actions. The first one would be if I were just a general member of the general public and I saw the actions you took, would I consider those actions and decisions to be reasonable ones in the circumstance you were in, right? And so if you exercise your due diligence, you're making decisions in the context of the information you have, and it's certainly not unreasonable in a lot of circumstances to make a decision in a moment with incomplete information. That's how you can often get to a circumstance where you make a decision using due care and then the outcome appears to be different than what you expected, right? So the other standard is if you've used a reasonable process where you've logically thought through it, and that can be shown to be the case, and you follow a set of agreed upon procedures in making your decisions, that's another way to illustrate due care in terms of your organization's exercise of oversight of your part of the organization. So again, it's not necessarily about outcomes. It's about the process by which you arrived at decisions you've made. If those are considered to be reasonable, then you've met your duty and your obligation of due care. So, to summarize your responsibility as a chapter leader on a 50,000-foot level, regardless of what your level of leadership is, it is important for you to recognize that you are a caretaker of the part of the organization to which you are elected to your position. And that means that you have to show obedience to the organization. That's one duty. Show loyalty to the organization, and then exercise due care in the exercise of your role as a leader of the chapter. Now, speaking specifically to the role of chapter officers, I list here the specific roles and responsibilities that are often that comment with the in each of these roles. And this is pretty general. I'm not going to go through this in any detail. You probably come through these and are familiar with them, but these are the standard ones. I'm going to pause really quickly. And if there are any questions, does anyone have any immediate questions before I move on to the next topic? Okay, really quickly, if you happen to have joined the call, if you would please mute your phone so that there isn't any background noise that goes on while I'm presenting, I'd appreciate that. Okay, so I want to really quickly cover the national directives and professional vision for the organization. And this will be a few slides just to give you guys a flavor for what we're trying to accomplish in 2019-2020. So I show you first here our national chairperson's national directives. Jocelyn Jackson is the 2019-2020 national chairperson. She is now a member of Region 4. She is a doctoral candidate at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. So you guys have the right to claim her, even though for much of her time in life she was in Region 5. She is now in your region, and I would claim full responsibility for that. But what she has said is that she wants us to focus, and so she's laid out that focus is kind of her mantra for her personal way of living, focusing on family, opportunities, commitments, unity, and I'm forgetting what the S is, and so I probably shouldn't have gone there. But basically what she's aiming for us to do using the FOCUS acronym is to do these three things for 2019 and 2020. First, she wants our organization to lead with purpose. And so focus on our values and use our values as the means of moving the organization forward. She also wants to make sure that we are seeing growth and development in all NSBE members who are participating in our programming. Second, leverage the NSBE ecosystem. So using that community, using the connections that we have as an organization, engaging membership, and increasing the visibility of NSBE's impact on the society, on all of society. And then third, securing the future of NSBE by improving our organizational strategy and institutionalizing best practices. So that's the national overall strategy for the year. Our national professionals chair has a great vision as well that is intended to align with those national directives. He's used the acronym CPR, and this is what CPR represents: continue the path, advancing our partnerships, establishing and maintaining repeatable processes. So if you look at those three elements here, the specific major goals that fall into the CPR program for the professionals for this year. In terms of continuing the path, our PEB is going to continue to pursue having the professionals chair receive a vote on the National Executive Board. We're going to continue to seek partnerships with the Board of Corporate Affiliates in order to make it clear to them what the professional's value is within the organization as a whole. And the PEB is in the process of institutionalizing the scholarship endowment, and that will be intended to be available not only to the collegiate level in terms of being able to continue to fill the pipeline, but also can be used for providing training opportunities where appropriate for our professional members as well. In terms of partnerships, we want to make sure that we are reaching out to our chapters and our members from a partnership standpoint. So you'll see we will have regular content available to you by webinar. We've actually already had a number of webinars already. We had the town hall with Julius Hudson in August. Before that, we had our PDC preview with the PDC chair, and then myself, I gave a membership recruitment presentation, and there will be continued forums for us to engage the rank and file membership by webinar as well as our event. We'll make sure that we are transparent in the direction and activity of the national and regional leadership. We want to leverage the special interest groups more, and so you'll see more visibility around their actual activities, and we want to encourage folks to actually participate in those. And then we'll also leverage our corporate partnerships to try to increase the financial support that's provided to the professionals in particular. And then in terms of repeatable process, we want to think both short-term and long-term, and so establishing the plan for this year and then leveraging out that to a 3-year plan, and then leveraging that out further to 5 to 10-year vision for what the organization is, and then also focus on what best practices we have around programming so that our chapters can leverage the things we've been doing successfully and be able to expand the benefit beyond the chapters that have generated those best practices so that all the chapters can benefit. And I do want to share something specific that is in that 1 to 3 year time frame because it's very specific to the membership zone in terms of what we've been working to try to develop, just to give you kind of a flavor of what we're hoping to deliver for you in the next 2 or 3 years as a professionals executive board. Specifically, when we met for the very first time as a PEB during our transition meeting, we had set the objective to say in 1 to 3 years' time, we want to say that we've developed and implemented a professionals programmatic model that is consistent across all the regions and does effectively engage our members. And those strategic elements focus on having continuous education portal, having a comprehensive communication plan for all of the activities and events that are going on for the society and the professionals in particular. Make sure that we are including the existing professional signature programming like special interest groups, finding a way to better deploy and involve our membership in the execution of our programmatic model, and then making sure that we have sustainable and scalable processes in place where we share those toolkits and best practices that chapters have readily accessible to make them accessible to the rank and file local membership. I know that when we did our survey in the May-June timeframe, one of the key things that stood out to us in terms of the questions we asked about programming is that many of our members said they wanted to make sure they had access to programming outside of our conferences. We've always had very strong conferences, but how do we deliver programming that's effective, that's uniform, regardless of what location you're at? And so this is the area we actually are focusing on this year to make sure that we get to a point where our members can feel that they're getting fed, so to speak, from a standpoint of programming, without having to necessarily attend the conference to get their only dose, so to speak. So I'll share that with you so that you're aware of that. There are a bunch of other plans that are going on, some of the other zones. The membership zone itself has other plans, particularly around recruitment and retention that we'll be sharing with you as well. Pause again really quickly before I move on to the next topic. Any questions about the national directives of professionals vision? Okay. So now the next topic I want to cover is about my perspectives on the things I think are important for you to keep in mind from a standpoint of building a strong, sustainable professionals chapter. And this is going to be relatively high level because I don't think that there is a single way to do it. But I do think that there are some common elements of, regardless of the way that you do it, that it works to be something where you don't burn people out in order to accomplish what you want to accomplish. I think it's important to be cohesive as well as inclusive with respect to your leadership process in order for it to be something where where you look back and you say, hey, we really built something really sustainable that more people want to be a part of. So I want to cover a few things and highlight a few points around that. So I mentioned that I think there's some common elements around a strong, healthy, sustainable chapter. These are really the 4 bullet points. So the 4 major headlines around what I think it takes to have that. First of all, it's important to build the team. And it's important to make sure that that team is entirely on the same page, that works together, that there are no hidden agendas or cliques or anything like that. And that requires a whole heck of a lot of work. And it requires a lot of intention. But the benefits of having a team that works cohesively in a way that everybody's moving in the same direction, those are the kinds of teams that are unbeatable. When you have an unbeatable team, there's nothing really that you're not going to be able to accomplish. Secondly is once you actually have that unbeatable, cohesive leadership team that's on the same page, you need to make sure that you've established and created a clear direction that you want to move in. And I mentioned before, I don't think that there's a right answer to the direction outside of it needs to be mission focused, right? That's your obligation as a fiduciary. But the team as a whole needs to come together around understanding the direction that the chapter is going to move in. And everybody has their contribution to that, but also everyone is bought in, yes, I have a role in making that direction happen, and we're going to pull together in that direction, right? Third is having the systems in place that create or that reinforce that direction that you're going in. So a lot of times you're going to do certain things that you say you want to do. That may require you to make sure that you have certain communication tools that you're going to implement. You may need to have certain kind of database in order to collect information, surveys, various systems, your finances. So like if you say that part of your direction is that you're going to raise $50,000 for scholarships, you have to come up with that plan for how you're going to get to that $50,000 for scholarships. If you're going to have a webinar every month that you're going to host, you've got to have system in place to actually deliver that webinar, whether you're going to use Facebook Live or you're going to get something like Zoom here that we're using on a national level or WebEx or things of that nature. We talk about systems. It's the how you accomplish the direction you're going. So that's the third element, being able to access those resources to support the direction you're going. The fourth element is making sure that your communication aligns to those systems in that direction that you're headed, right? So, and that communication is internal. So making sure you have a system to communicate with each other in terms of the team, as well as external, and how you're going to communicate to your constituencies, whether that and your stakeholders, whether that be your members, whether that be your corporate sponsors, whether that be just general members of the community, whether that be community leaders that you may need to get support from in order to do things and gain access to resources, etc. You got to have a plan and approach. All right, so I'm going to just really quickly run through those again from the context of digging into the details. Now, when you are thinking about that cohesive leadership team, I think there are 5 clear characteristics of that team. First of all, that team has a lot of trust. Each and every individual of the team trusts each other. Then that leads to a group that's willing to engage in constructive conflict. If they don't trust each other, they won't challenge each other. And challenging each other is how you come to a common understanding of a way forward. When you have that willingness to trust and are able to engage in constructive conflict, you get to the point where everybody's on the same page and you have commitment. So we've made a decision of a direction we're going to go. Everybody's had their say. They've had the disagreements and the fights. But ultimately, you come around to how you make that final decision. Decisions made. Everybody's had their chance to speak. And now you're committed to, yes, this is the way we're going to go forward. Once everybody's committed and say, yes, this is the way we're going, You can establish that, and everybody has an accountability to it. If I'm committed to it, then it means that if we don't deliver it, that means I had a role in us not delivering it. When we're committed and we have that trust, and we've had it out to say what will our opinions are. And when you have that accountability, that leads to you saying, what are my results? At the end of the day, the results are what matter. I'm oriented around the results. We need to deliver those results. I'm accountable for what exactly, right? I'm going to deliver this result, or we together are going to deliver this result, come hook or by crook. And that's where the accountability comes in. You can't get that without commitment, and you don't get to commitment unless you have the trust and the constructive conflict to come up with the decision that's ultimately made. If any of these things fall apart or become dysfunctional, then everything is basically a crack in the organization, right? You have to work from the bottom, from the top down, and get that trust back together. Be willing to challenge each other. Be committed to a direction, and then make sure that the results come through your efforts and your commitment to doing it. I think in terms of clear direction for your organization, it's important to know what you're trying to accomplish, and that's where goal setting comes in. You want to think long term, 5 years from now, much like you would with your career. 5 years from now, where do I want this chapter to be at? And I think that does a lot to help you establish how I get from here to 5 years from now, especially in terms of taking that long-term view and then bringing it to the here and now. What are the things I need to do today, next week, next month, next 6 months, this year, in order to have the chapter be in a place that it can accomplish 5 years from now what we want it to. And it also sets the stage for what are the things we need to do to get to what that goal is in order to keep the chapter on target for getting to that long-range vision. Once you've established that clear understanding of what your goals are, it's not enough just to say, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. It's important to make sure that you have assignments. Okay, this person is responsible for this part of the plan, right? That's critical, because you can then go to that person and say, how are we doing, right? And do you need help? And you can work together to make sure that that gets taken care of. And of course, I know you've heard of the acronym SMART as it relates to goals, and I fully buy into that, right? Specific, measurable, attainable, I always forget the R, relevant, and time-bound, right? So SMART goals, really critical. Think in terms of those elements of a goal, because that allows you to make sure that you've got the accountability and it's clear when you've achieved the goal. Then I talk about systems for reinforcing direction. To me, these are the 4 that you need to make sure that are included in reinforcing what you're trying to accomplish. Meetings are critical. I mean, there's just no way to get around making sure that you have accountability if you're not having some regular meeting with the folks who are actually responsible for each of these elements to check on, hey, have we made progress on that? What are the things we need to do going forward? That's where you create both the trust and the constructive conflict that needs to occur in order to move your organization that you're responsible for forward. Making sure that you have a routine and a cadence for which stuff happens, right? So how often are you going to have your executive board meetings? How often are you going to have your general body meetings? How often are you going to host your programming so that you create a regularity for your members to be engaged with you? That's critical, not only from the standpoint of doing your regular work and executing the organization, but having that commitment from the leadership as well as the members itself to being a part of it. If you can create a regular cadence that works for your members, they stay committed to it. Documentation is essential, not only from the standpoint of making sure that you remain accountable to each other, but also just making sure that for posterity's sake, people understand what you're trying to accomplish and can then help you if by chance you're either falling behind or you want to bring some other folks in and bring them up to speed in order to provide you additional support. Or if by chance something happens where you need to have a change, that documentation serves as a way to get that person that's coming in where there's a change back up to speed relatively quickly so that you guys continue to pace with your work. And I think that for me, rewards and consequences are really essential parts of the accountability and results orientation of that teamwork component. And that reinforces what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish. So if you achieve a really significant goal, you should make sure that you take the time to celebrate that in some way, shape, or form. You should take the time to recognize people who do excellent work. And if you don't meet a goal, then it's important to take a look at why you didn't meet that goal. You don't necessarily have to beat yourself up over it, unless there's, an issue that warrants that. That's directly causative, and you have the evidence for that. But sometimes things don't work out as you've planned them, and there should be consequences to that, to be sure. But that does not necessarily mean that you have to do anything particularly punitive. You just say, I'm going to change the way I'm going to handle things going forward. It may mean you have to change your systems. It may mean that you need to move people into other areas where they'll be more effective in doing what needs to be done to move you forward. That's the kind of thing I'm referring to with respect to consequences. And again, I'll just reinforce, important to celebrate when you've accomplished something significant. And it's important to share it with others when you've done something important so that they can recognize you as well. So finally, you want to make sure you're aligning your communication to your direction. And the elements of that include considering who needs to know what you're doing. Obviously, your members might fall into that category. Your regional leadership might fall into that category. Your national leadership might fall in that category. You also want to consider what you want them to know. You also want to consider what they want to know about what you're doing. And then you'll also want to think about timing. How often will you share it with the team, as well as how would you plan to share it with them, right? There may be systems already in place to share the information. You want to leverage and use those. You may want to go outside of it to do some kind of special communication. And you may want to forward a piece of special communication out directly to a subset of folks that will then publicize it to make it, push out. So think about how you want to leverage communication in alignment with the direction you are aiming to go in order to meet your particular objectives, whether it's the rewards and consequences piece, or it's the actual execution of delivering upon your goals. Communication and the structure by which you do your communication need to be essential parts of that management strategy for you to actually do that. All right, pausing one more time to take any questions about the things I've shared to you about building a chapter. You want to make sure that you have a strong, cohesive leadership team. You want to make sure that you set a clear direction for the way you want to go and your vision where you're going forward. You want to make sure that you put in systems that reinforce that direction, and then you also want to align your communication to match that direction and make sure it's consistent with it. Questions? All right. So the final thing I want to cover from a national point of view is to talk about the tools that we make available to you in order to help you in terms of your chapter development. And really, this is the essence and the purpose of the Chapter Health Initiatives for Professionals program. Specifically, in order to find all the resources for that, you go to the NSBE Professionals website. www.nesby.org/professionals. Under the resources tab here, you click on that, it takes you to a page that has a set of listings that include the chapter directory, but at the very bottom, there's a link to the Chapter Health Initiatives for Professionals webpage. And the illustration of that particular page is on the slide here. This is what the page looks like. Keep in mind that in order to get to this page, you do have to be logged into your NSBE Connect account in order to access it. So make sure that what will happen is if you go to this page without having logged in, it'll say you need to log in. There will be a link that will take you to the page that allows you to log in. And then when you log in, it should take you right back to this page. But the elements of the CHIP program are all there, the functional support piece, and that's specifically our chapter toolkits. And I direct people here because this is where we provide the information about our programs and how to execute them. There's a communications toolkit that's really useful if you're interested in setting up a website and how to do that, or setting up your email accounts for your chapter. Let's say you want to have G Suite for your chapter and use that for your email. That toolkit helps you out with that, so directing you to that. In the next month, we will republish our tax-exempt playbook. So for those who want to make sure that they got their 501c3 in order, we will have that toolkit ready and available for you in October. And that's just really, and there's also for people who are looking to start a new chapter, we have a chapter constitution template there as well. Or if you want to use that particular template to compare against your existing chapter constitution and see if there are any gaps in terms of how you want to structure your chapter, you have the ability to leverage and use that. So toolkits there. We're hoping to publish more this year, so there's additional support in terms of being able to make sure that you're functionally sound as well as programmatically sound in terms of executing your program. We have our reporting structure that resides on this page. So when we actually request reports, this is the page where you go to find the report that you need to submit. I want to talk more about that next. And then the final piece is the recognition framework, where the description of all of the elements of all the CHIP health levels is given. On the reporting piece, I just want to highlight a couple of things because we've started to roll out the CHIP reporting structure for 2019-2020. For those of you who are returning to chapter leadership, you should pretty much be familiar with the reporting piece as it was previously done. And basically the way it worked was, beginning of the program year, chapter was asked to submit their participation report. And that was a one-time per year thing where you reported the initial state of your chapter beginning of the year. That's still going to happen. We still also have the chapter activity report. It was formerly known as the CHIP event report. We're now calling it the CHIP activity report because sometimes there are things that a chapter wants to report as an activity that wasn't necessarily, a hosted event of any sort. And that's perfectly fine. We want to capture as much of that information as possible. And we'll continue to request the quarterly reports from chapters every quarter according to the original schedule we had. So first quarter is August through October, due at the end of November. Second quarter is November through January, due at the end of February. February through April is due at the end of May, and then May through July due in August. That will remain. I mentioned the reporting frequency, it's all the same there. And I do also want to highlight that it is important that chapters participate if they wish to be eligible for recognition, whether it's the health statuses or the Chapter Excellence Award. So if you are interested in being the PCI Chapter of the Year or the CI Chapter of the Year, Professional Development Chapter of the Year, Region 4, or on a national basis for Region 4 Chapter of the Year, Professional Chapter of the Year, or National Professional Chapter of the Year, participation in these reports is obligatory in order to be eligible for that. So all of that is not changing. I do want to share with you that a fair amount is changing with respect to the reports. Talk about this on high level. I have now set it up such that all the reports do not require you to complete the participation report in order to actually submit information. Reality is we want information from all of our chapters. So if you were an active chapter last year, you all automatically are eligible to submit all the reports. Now, I do want to highlight that if you want to be recognized as an organization, for all of the awards, you still have to complete that initial participation report in order to get that. But we're not going to hold that against you if you want to submit your activities and your quarterly reports. We still want to have that data. We still want to ask our leadership to review that information and be able to use that as feedback to support you as an organization. So we're no longer setting that aside in order to ask for that information. The other thing I've done is tried to streamline the reports even further, so the report should not take as much time as they did in the past, and that's for all of the reports of all the types. And specifically, I know that the quarterly report was always a very dense report that needed to be completed. What that basically is now doing in order to make them shorter is I've broken all of the quarterly reports into functional and programmatic areas. So now there will be a separate financial report on a quarterly basis, a separate report for marketing communications, a membership report, your goal progress report for your chapter, and then in each of the programmatic areas as well. So that's going to sum up to quarterly reports in about 8 to 10 different areas, but at least that individual area that you're reporting, you ought to be able to delegate that to the person responsible on your executive board to actually fill in the information on behalf of your chapter. Or if it's an area where your chapter is actually not executing any programming, it's perfectly appropriate not to submit it. The information you do share is what will go into what your portfolio is for the information that our leadership will review. So again, you choose which reports are appropriate for you to submit, and it also allows your chapter to distribute the workload as opposed to having one person collecting all the information and submitting one great big report, a bunch of different reports that can be submitted on behalf of the chapter. And then we're also adding some additional reports that are not, that are ancillary and for collection purposes. So one of the big things we want to make sure that we're doing is coming up with a way to recognize members on a national level. And so we want to create an opportunity for the chapters to actually submit recognition on behalf of the chapters, whether we can include that in, or excuse me, members, whether we can include that in things like newsletters or find other venues in which to recognize members that do excellent things. We want to capture that. We know a lot of times chapters end up in their local media, newspapers, local TV stations doing extra special things. I think we want to have a way to actually capture that on a national level, and so we're going to ask that when those kinds of things happen for your chapter, that we have a report for you guys to submit it when it happens. And so there will be a report for that. And then the last thing is, one of the big things we captured last year was that a lot of chapters gave away scholarships, and we want to make sure that we're putting in front of our members as well as our other stakeholders how much in terms of scholarship support that our chapters are actually providing to the society as a whole. I mean, the financial piece is always a really big part of making sure that students actually stay in school and matriculate to completion of their degrees. Chapters make such a big and important role in that. We want to make sure that we're capturing and recognizing that as well. So we decided to create a specific report just for the scholarships, so that we have a sense of where those scholarships are being distributed. Are they leaning more towards our collegiate recipients, or are they being awarded to high school graduates? We want to assess that and fully understand the nature and picture of our scholarship awards throughout the society and capture that information. Of course, all of this information also goes into the chapter's overall picture of what you're accomplishing programmatically, and so we'll make sure to filter that information in so that it can be used to adjudicate the activities of the chapter throughout the year. So just to wrap up the coverage of the reporting piece, I think it's very important for every chapter to participate. one, it is consistent with those fiduciary duties. We do not ask you to prepare information for us merely for our benefit. Yes, it benefits us so that we can advocate better for you. But I think that the other thing that's important about these reports is just like if you did an exam in school, it helps to reinforce what you're accomplishing and to see what you're actually doing. And likewise, it gives you an opportunity to identify and assess just by virtue of completing the report. Hey, had I thought about this thing and should we be doing something in this space, right? And then also it's our way of being able to assess what the chapters are doing by way of being able to recognize you for all of your efforts and all of the awards and stuff. So for me, this is really critical and important stuff that we ask all of our chapters to participate in so that we can have a full picture of what we're accomplishing as a society as a whole. And likewise, you can recognize and understand what opportunities you have to move your chapter forward, to celebrate the successes that your chapter has, and have it all documented in a way that it's coherent and understandable. Again, overall, the reporting process has two objectives. One is to identify what's going well and what's not at the chapter level, and then an objective means for comparing chapter performance against what the stated mission of the society is, right? Are you accomplishing the mission? Are we struggling to meet the mission? What ways can we support you? Is there anything that you can share with us that we can leverage out to other chapters to provide them an opportunity to take advantage of the excellent things that you're doing? And of course, a key part of the recognition piece from our standpoint has to do with these health status levels. And so I kind of give the high level description of each of those: certified silver, gold, and diamond. We really had an excellent year in 2018, 2019 with respect to these health statuses. We had a number of chapters in Region 4 in particular, but overall throughout the society, we had a lot of chapters in all the regions that scored really highly in terms of these health statuses. And I think we got a fair amount of buy-in from the chapters with respect to that. And so we want to continue to encourage chapters to do the reporting so that we can recognize them in this fashion. And what I would also hope is that the chapters would individually take pride in the health status levels that they achieve, right? They can use that to encourage members to say, hey, we're doing excellent programming at the chapter level. You ought to come out and be a part of it because this is the recognition we've received at the national level, right? So, I mean, that's the main reason why we do it, more than just saying we see you and recognize all the great work you're doing. We want you to be able to take that and leverage that out to be able to use that for your growth. All right, so that is actually all of my content for this evening. I want to open it up one last time for anyone that has any questions as it relates to chapter development that I can field. And maybe I should have said this earlier, but I think in almost every case you guys were, when you joined, were on mute. So if you need to ask a question, I believe the appropriate way to do that would be to unmute your phone to ask the question.
I have a comment. So
Yeah.
thank you, Eric, for presenting. I really love the build on the CHIP report of redistributing the quarterly reports. So context for people on the call who have not filled out CHIP reports. Previously, it could ask questions such as how many people in your chapter received promotions or got an advanced degree, or what were the flyers you used on your most recent event this past quarter. And typically, like, the president or programs chair would just have to find all the information and put it in the report. So the fact that you broke it up so that it can go to respective zones, I am a big fan.
Thank you. And you were not the only one to provide that feedback to me of wanting to be able to more easily distribute the workload of submitting the reports. I will say that in my original design, we wanted to make sure that we had some distribution of the work. When we developed the original quarterly report, we thought it would be set up in a way where individuals could go into the report and submit their piece and it would be saved. We unfortunately, from a technology perspective with the job forms, weren't able to do that. So we had to come up with an alternative, which we didn't originally do with the first set of reports, but we were now in a position where we can make those changes. And hopefully with the way we're handling it now, it will be positively received by the chapters in terms of being able to submit their information, making it easy, trying for it not to be intimidating, because when it is intimidating, my concern is that it becomes a discouragement to doing so. So we want every chapter to be willing to submit and participate by submitting the information, so it becomes incumbent to make that process easy. Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, you see here my email address, pebmembership@nsb.org. I try to be very responsive to individuals' questions and try to address issues as needed. By all means, if you have any questions from a chapter development standpoint, I'm here to support and provide guidance as I can. I will say that I really am hopeful you will lean on and leverage your regional leadership as well, because these are the guys that are going to be, your direct points of contact and most available to provide you the support you need as it relates to your chapters being supported. Make sure you remain in constant contact with that regional resource. As we push out information throughout the year, they're going to be the key conduit for you to stay abreast of the things going on with respect to what we're doing at the national and regional levels, and making sure that you guys stay aligned and attuned to the direction the society is going on as a whole. So with that, I am going to turn it back over to you, Ashley, and I appreciate the opportunity to share this information with with all of you. Thank you for attending and listening.
Thank you so much, Eric. All right, you all, we are going to transition in the last 30 minutes to the regional specific NSB Professionals 101. I just want to emphasize top level for CHIP. It's basically a replacement for monthly reports. So people who have not seen or interacted with this process before, it replaced the need for monthly reports from each individual and from the chapters and from the presidents. It streamlined it into one central location with a template, and you just answer the questions. And I think it's super helpful. So if you guys have follow-up questions after you see the first CHIP report, please feel free to lean on your regional counterpart. Awesome. Now transitioning into Professionals 101 from Region 4 perspective, we have 4 main things we want to touch on. Is 1, who is your professional executive board? We'll briefly do a spin around so you can see who's representing you, jump into the data of where we currently sit, talk about the regional directives, and wrap up with upcoming events for Region 4. So kicking off Region 4 Professional Board, team, when we get to your zone, could you please say your name, where you're from, and where you work? So everyone, my name is Ash McCrae. I'm based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, came from the Twin Cities chapter, and I work for General Mills. I am the regional chair and the lead for the admin zone. Sorry, I'll go next.
Good evening, everyone. I am Shari Briggs, and I am your Region 4 Professionals Chair-elect and also head of the membership zone. I currently reside in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where I work for Rockwell Automation.
Going on any order now, guys. Joseph?
Oh, okay. Hey, this is Joseph. I'm originally from Ethiopia and currently reside in Minnesota, Minneapolis, Minnesota. I I work at Cummins as a systems engineer.
Precious? Boba?
Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Boba Kamalafi. I reside in Indianapolis, and I work for Cummins as an application engineer.
Phil?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Philip Reed. I reside in Dayton, Ohio, where I currently work as a green building design mechanical system design engineer, and I serve as the PCI chairperson for Region 4.
Good evening, everyone. This is Thomas Reed. I'm the Talent Development Chair. I reside in the Chicagoland area, the western suburbs. I work for General Electric.
Hello, everybody. My name is Brooke. I live in Troy, Michigan. I'm the finance chair. I work at Aptiv. It's an autonomous car company as a software engineer.
Alex or Heather? So Heather and Alex both are based in the Twin Cities, and Precious is based out of Milwaukee. Awesome. So let's jump into this membership data. As of September 18th, we have 13 active chapters and 447 members. So if you're wondering how that compares to the previous year, that's about 100 members shy of where we were at the end of the fiscal year, which is not uncommon. It's still at the beginning of the next year, and a lot of people don't realize they haven't paid their dues or they expired until they come to your general body meetings. So please, as chapter leaders, remind your chapter members to not only pay their local dues, but pay their national dues so that our numbers really reflect who is in our chapters currently. Because ultimately, that all ties back to our drive to 2025. Eric mentioned on his piece that membership data, I don't know if you guys remember, but during the summer, there was a big push from the National Society for members to fill out this very comprehensive survey. Based off of the survey, I wanted to pull out top level data so you guys saw what we as professionals depicted we were doing very well and what our opportunity areas were. So the most positive arenas you'll see on the screen right now is society know and understand what our NSBE mission is. So in terms of understanding what is NSBE, the pride, the family, the connection, we do that very well. On the flip side, our opportunity areas, you see on your screen, the most negative feedback came really centered around NSBE 2025. One, what is it? Two, and most importantly, how do the professionals really play a role? And the question a lot of our members had is like, how do I, as a working professional, really contribute to this goal of graduating 10K by 2025? I'm already graduated. So that, as us, as regional national leaders, we took that back to brainstorm on how we can do a better job of articulating that difference. And the bottom one you'll see is focused around national dues. If we were to increase the rates, would people pay that? As you can see, it's pretty resounding no. And for us as a regional executive board, we took that to mean we need to better articulate the membership value as a professional, which all goes into the different directives and what we're focusing on for the year. Now, I mentioned 2025, and we saw that that's a big opportunity that people don't know what it is. So let me break it down for us. For anyone who has not heard of 2025, we as a society committed to graduating 10,000 Black engineers by 2025. Why 10,000? Because we are part of the 50K coalition, which is a fancy smancy way of saying we committed with other affinity networks for engineers that we were going to all change the numbers and the statistics. So we are in this 50K by 2025 pack with SWE, SHIP, and ACES. So all four of us have committed that we are going to, as a unit, increase the number of female, Hispanic, Native American, and Black engineers by 2025. Our specific piece of the puzzle is 10,000. Now, you're probably wondering as engineers where we are versus where we started. In 2015, when we announced this commitment, we were about 3,500 Black engineers graduating annually. Since announcing the past 3 years, we were able to increase that number by almost 30%. So the data most recent data I have from last year is we're sitting around 4,500, which is great that we see progress, but it's still not where we need to be if we want to make it to 2025. And that's basically where we come in. For us, when we really trickle down to what can professionals contribute to increasing the number of graduating seniors, we want to make sure that we as professional chapters are increasing or taking away a barrier for collegiate and pre-collegiate students to achieve these degrees, which for a lot of students is finances. And that's why one of the regional directives this year is increasing the number of Region 4 scholarship recipients. So I'll talk in depth as we go through each bullet. First one, for us as your regional executive board, we want to make sure that we were the resources that you as chapter leaders needed. And that started with earlier chapter leadership training, updating the format so that it was better to digest and actually implement. And overall, how can we make this a continuous process versus one time at the beginning of the year? Second, we got feedback from past chapter leaders that there was no uniform NSBE Region 4 programming that allowed or encouraged chapters to work with each other across states. So we decided to emphasize and encourage all of our chapters to take part in NSBE Engineering Week Takeover. So that's in February. I think it's the 16th through the 22nd this year. It is a national event, not just NSBE, but what we want is that NSBE Region 4 professionals really take heed and go hard, whether that's hosting a walk for education or going into classrooms and speaking to students about what it is to be a professional. We are just providing the skeleton that this is what we're focusing on during this month, and we're leaving the details and the meat of the bones to each chapter. If you're already doing things for eWIG, perfect. If you haven't, then this is a great catalyst to start. And the beauty is, since every chapter would be working on something, it creates that community of leaders and collaboration. Third, increasing the number of Region 4 scholarship recipients. I mentioned previously the idea behind that. If your chapter currently gives out scholarships, no worries. You can give out more. And that's definitely gonna be a conversation within the finance and treasurer zones of how to not only create and distribute scholarship money, but how can you really get the funds from corporate sponsorship and donations so that your chapter can function as well as give back to the community. Finally, chapter visibility. And that goes back to our goals as your Region 4 professional board. How can we not only be an email, but be a true resource? And by us being great at our job of being a resource, then you will be not only visible to us, but to other chapters within your area. So those are the 4 directives for this year from the Region 4 professionals, and they really tie in not only with 2025, but our national professional vision of CPR. The goal here is how can we continue our processes and make them better. Finally, I'll pause here for questions. Any questions, comments on the past 3 slides? If not, I will transition into my last slide, which is upcoming events. So Fall Regional Conference is going to be held in Grand Rapids, Michigan this year. For people who are not familiar with NSBE, because this is a 101 call, NSBE has a handful of annual events. We as a society are broken up into 6 regions. We are Region 4, the mother region, which encompasses the Midwest. which means every fall for our regional conference, it will rotate between different locations within the Midwest. This year is in Michigan, specifically Grand Rapids, from November 14th through the 17th. The rates and hotel rooms, I believe, have been opened already. Finance Zone went on your treasurer call. Joseph and Brooke can confirm that for you. So Fall Regional Conference is going to be in November. We are one of the later ones this year. So please encourage your chapter members to attend and encourage your companies to get involved. Then 2 months later, we have our E-Week takeover. And that is February 16th to the 22nd. And then wrapping up the NSBE year, we have annual convention, which is taking place in San Antonio, Texas, March 25th through 29th. Now, what's not depicted here is that the PDC location has been announced for 2020. It is going to be in Miami. Now, I could not remember the exact date, which is why it's not on the slide, but it will be around the same time frame as this past PDC, which was at the end of August. So think of end of summer more so than beginning of fall, and it will be in Miami. So you can really start pumping that up to your chapters and making sure your members know all the things going on. So that was a lot of information. Any questions on that?
Hey, Ashley, I'm still on. This is Eric. The dates for 2020 Professional Development Conference are August 12th through 16th, 2020.
All right, so Miami, August 12th through the 16th. And I will add that nugget on the slide before we send them out to you all, just in case you do not have a pen and paper next to you right now. Okay, and then from a chapter leader perspective, since the rooms are open for FRC and the annual convention rooms will probably be open soon, a good rule of thumb for smaller chapters is to book at least one room per sex. So 2 rooms as soon as rooms open, so you guarantee a spot in the NSBE block. And then if you don't need them, you can always drop them without having to pay, as long as it's a little higher. But professionals, you don't want to wait until the last minute and then get a hotel in the boonies. I know we got money, but convenience is convenience. All right, so last but not least, want to wrap up and remind you guys of the agenda for the rest of this week. So you guys have successfully completed day 1, NSBE 101. Tomorrow is Communication and Finance Zone, so only those zone topics will be covered. If you do not sit in that zone but still want to attend, feel free. We always welcome people who want to get knowledge, but we are focusing specifically on zone content moving forward. So if you have non-zone related questions, now's the time to ask. So I'll finish this rundown and then open it back up for questions within the last 10 minutes. Tomorrow's Communication Zone and Finance, led by Precious, Joseph, and Brooke. Wednesday is going to be Membership Zone and Admin Zone, led by me, Shari, and Heather. And then we're wrapping up Thursday for Program Zone, which will be led by Boba, Phil, and Thomas.
Hey, Ashley, will these be available for our other leadership members to view at a later date?
Yep. We will send out the slide deck and there will be links to the recordings.
Excellent.
And there will also be a survey that goes out after our Thursday closing session. So we will not send one out after today, but if you have nuggets and feedback and want to keep it fresh, please write it down. We will have one comprehensive survey for all of the sessions at the end.
Good deal.
Thanks for the question, though. Any other questions, comments, concerns, or builds, things that you really hope to hear over the next 3 days? Any final questions for Eric or Nesby professional questions you have?
Hey, I have a quick question. From a communications perspective, I know that one of the initiatives is chapter visibility. Is it possible for us to have access to a professional PR person or someone who can give our communications team some really in-depth information on how to deal with local media, how to engage local media, et cetera, et cetera?
That's a great suggestion. I will take that back with our national professionals chair, because I think that type of content would be beneficial, not just for our chapter leaders, but all chapter comm zone professionals. Maurice, if you're still on the call, I'll come to you later.
For sure.
Thanks, Mel. Any other great questions or comments like that? All right, give me one more. I can wait.
Hey Ashley, this is Ray.
Hey Ray.
Hey everybody, I'm Ray, Nesby Twin Cities Professionals Chapter President. So I see one of the Region 4 directives is kind of the e-week takeover. Can you kind of explain more in depth what you would suggest some chapters, or what would be some suggestions you have for chapters to do?
Yeah. So I know there's a couple chapters on the call who currently do e-week activities. So I will do a short answer, then yield the floor to Chicago or Cincinnati. So suggestions for e-week that I've seen done. Some people, they go into classrooms and specifically discuss what does an engineer do. So like classroom visits, professional for a day. Other chapters do a walk for education. So a walk for education is a national program, but they just choose to do it during engineering week to kill two birds with one stone. A walk for education specifically, I've seen it done door to door, knocking on doors and handing out information on what it means to be in STEM. I've also seen it be more so like a career fair type thing, where it's held indoors and it's a mixture of STEM exposure and education to parents and students of not only what STEM is, how to get into it, but how to get into college and these STEM programs for free. Actually, I'll pause there. Melanie, do you want to speak to what Chicago Nesby has done in the past for e-week?
Sure. So we started off, this will be our 8th year doing our Engineers Week program. It has grown from being just a Saturday that we get students K through 12 into a local university or college, and then we have our professional members volunteer to do 1 hour STEM activities with them. And so we basically do about 4 different sessions, and then we provide them with lunch and all of that. It started off there, and now it's we do 4 sessions. We have about 300 parents and students come out, volunteers. And then we also have an Emerging Technologies Expo where our corporate partners come out and show the students a lot of the technology that they're working on within their companies. And so not only is it a great way to really engage a very large number of students and parents within the community, but it's also a great way to get our members en masse out to talk to that community. And then it's also a great way to get our corporate partners some visibility in terms of showing, having them come out and see, hey, yes, there is a future in the community that's really interested in what you're doing and excited about what you're doing. So that's pretty much what we do. But I think this year, just to kind of amp it up, I think maybe we'll also throughout the week get into some classrooms as well. So that was a great idea. Thanks for that suggestion.
Thanks, Melanie.
Ashley,
Here.
this is Phil.
Okay, 1 second, Phil. One thing I want to make really clear is Engineering Week, you don't have to do something every single day within that week. You can pick a day or multiple days to do something in E-Week. Go for it, Phil.
Alrighty, so just in general about E-Week, it's just an opportunity for the engineering community to give back to the dedicated engineering workforce, and by increasing the understanding of students and just pursue that interest in engineering and technology careers to up and coming students. And that's the mission, that's what the NESI mission is all about anyway. So we're just basically trying to put out or proceed or give out opportunities for the professional chapters to go back into their communities and do what they do and living out the mission, providing the mission back in their local communities. So and that is a broad range. There's definitely been a couple of ideas already thrown out there, but engagement, education, and exposure is really important to kind of increase that that magnitude into the students. So any type of ideals that you guys have for that definitely is worthwhile pursuing.
Great dialogue. And I'm sure we could have even deeper dives on E-Week during the program session on Thursday.
Correct.
Awesome. All right, team, we have 3 minutes left. Any last questions, comments, or concerns? If not, I want to thank you all for joining us, and I look forward to seeing or hearing your voices for the rest of the week. Have a good night, everyone. Bye.
Good night. Thanks, everyone.
Good night, Ashley. Thank you.
Follow solid.